Chapter 3 is where we'll start. We're going to be at Proverbs pretty much, I think, the entire time today. I might have one verse or two that are outside of it, but mostly Proverbs is where we'll be. Proverbs chapter 3 is where we'll start. So we're continuing our parents' lesson series, and this week we have discipline. So we're going through guide. Let's put all that up here. So give, understand, instruct, discipline today. And encourage and supplicate. And again, going back to the love and respect circle and understanding that kids need love, parents need respect, and we as parents want to give love to our children as much as possible and express that love and verbalize that love and understand that they don't always give us the respect that we need, and that's sometimes where the frustration can come from. But being the mature party of the relationship, understanding that about ourselves and being able to overcome those things and being ambassadors for God in taking care of our kids. So obviously going through discipline, and we'll talk about this, or I'll mention this, is that discipline is a form of love. For parents to not discipline in the Bible, I'm sure we'll read that verse if I recall right. Not disciplining is the opposite of showing love. And so, we can see evidence in our culture of a generation that is not disciplined and was not disciplined as children in their growing up years. Not to say that none of them were, but just in general as a culture, anybody telling me not to do what I want to do or telling me to do something I don't want to do is not allowed, right? It's something that is rebelled against. And so obviously as parents, we go to Scripture and we want to raise our kids from what God says is the way things should be done. And he's very, very specific, especially in Proverbs, about how to rear your kids and how to even discipline your kids. So the beginning part here, we'll talk about the discipline itself, and then we'll get into maybe a little bit more practical things as well. But Proverbs chapter 3, verse number 12 is where we'll start. Proverbs 3, verse number 12, and this is in general. This isn't just for us as parents to our kids, even though it is mentioned. This says, "For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth. Even as a father, the son in whom he delighteth." So just starting off right there, if a form of love, when someone is off where they're supposed to be, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, it's love to correct them. It's love to show them and put them back on the path. And so as we talk about our children, correcting their behavior or correcting their mode or where their heart is a form of love, is a way for us to show love, just like the Lord shows love to us when he corrects us, right? When you make mistakes, when you do things you're not supposed to do, it is the Lord showing you love when a friend points it out to you or the sermon convicts you, right? Or just the Lord in your own time shows you and corrects you. That's him loving you. And that's how he disciplines and how he corrects. Go to Proverbs chapter 13. Proverbs chapter 13. Verse number 24. And here we get into specific discipline for parents and children. Verse 24 of Proverbs 13 says, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes." So, and we'll talk, there's a few other verses we'll go to here about the rod and the form of discipline. I'll touch on that a little bit today, but we'll not really go into that a whole bunch. I mean, we could spend a whole lesson just talking about the rod specifically and the proper uses of it and things of that nature. We aren't necessarily going to go there today, other than to say that there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it when it comes to the rod, right? And just like everything we've talked about in parenting, if you allow your emotions to control you, that's the wrong way. And that also applies to discipline. If you allow your anger or your frustration to be the controlling factor in discipline, you're doing it wrong. You're not doing it the way the Lord has instructed us to do it. Again, it's about love. It's about correction. And not to get too ahead of myself, it's corrective, not punitive. Right? It is a punishment, but that's not really the main goal of discipline, is to punish. It's not to rub anything in anybody's face. It's not to prove a point. It's to change direction. It's to change a heart. And that's as parents, that's where we have to come from. That's a position we have to come from when it comes to discipline. So the word correct there, it means to be right or to convince, to rebuke, to reason. The word rod is literally a stick, right? That's what it is. It's literally a stick if you look it up, or length of something. And then the word chasten, I think I'm getting ahead without getting there. Yep, now we read those. Okay, to be right, correct. Chasten is chastisement. Smart. Reproof, warning, instruction, correction, right? That's what the word chasten means. So, and we'll go here a couple more verses. Go to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22, we'll do 13 through 15. Proverbs 22, 13 through 15. I got something wrong here. Sorry. Proverbs 22, 15. 22:15 says, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. So we're trying, kids, we talked about the silliness that exists in children, and this word foolishness is just absence, right, of knowledge. And so children do dumb stuff because they don't have the knowledge. The foolishness is there. And the rod is used to correct them. And again, it's used to change their direction, right, to change their heart, to help them to understand the right way to do things. Proverbs 23, verse number 13, so maybe a page over, Proverbs 23, 13, says, withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. And again, the word beat there isn't like beating mercilessly and nonstop. It's not a beating like you'd see in a boxing ring or anything like that. The beating is just applying the correction, applying the rod and using it. And really, and again, I jump ahead of myself, but when we withhold correction, and God says here, withhold not correction. When we withhold correction, oftentimes it's for our sake, as the giver of the correction, not necessarily the child's sake. We're not doing it necessarily because we don't want to correct them. It's because either it's inconvenient, we just don't feel like doing it. We're upset by the punishment we're meting out, whatever the reasons may be. But as God says here, don't withhold that, right? Because when you withhold that, you're actually doing them a disservice, right? And obviously, as children grow, there's different methods that can be used at different times, right? When we have using the rod or spanking at different ages, not that I couldn't do it still, but it's spanking Carter, right? He turns 18 this week. Spanking him, it might do well, and then depending on what it is, I do, if I recall, I think this was this last year, I think he lipped off to his mom or something, and we had that conversation, and we did it. We did the physical punishment. But, once he's going to be 18, he's in my house, bending him over my knee may not be as effective anymore as some other things might be. Not to say that you just stop because they're at a certain age. Every child is a certain way, and it may not be the rod every single time, right? There may be other methods that you'll use, but God is very specific about that is how it should be done, right? That is how we should discipline. It's how you get through to them. Proverbs 29. Go to Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs 29, verse number 15. Don't bring that up to Carter. I'll feel real bad if he gets embarrassed that I told everybody I spanked him. Or do, whatever. Proverbs 29, 15. He'll act like he doesn't remember. The Bible says, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. And again, he just proves over and over and over again, and it plays out. It plays out true that when a child is undisciplined, when he's not corrected, when he's not disciplined in that way, not every single time, but the majority of the time he grows up and it becomes a problem. He has problems in his life in other areas. If you're not disciplined as a child, it's real hard to follow your boss. It's real hard to follow the rules. And so you do your child a disservice by not doing so. Jump down a couple verses there. Verse 17 says, correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. In the moment, no child is going to like it, right? In the moment, no child is going to enjoy it. No child is even necessarily even going to see the reason for it. But as they grow, as they become adults, and they churn out, hopefully, the way that the Lord wants them to, they will appreciate what the discipline that you have set up for them, that you have trained them in. Not because of the act of it, but because of the heart behind it and the reason behind it and the direction and the attention that you're trying to get from them. So again, God is very, very specific and very clear on how we should do those things. And we can say, well, I don't know, and we have a lot of objections to why we don't think we should spank or use the rod. You can argue with what I'm saying as much as you want, or as much as we want, but what Scripture says is very clear. It's hard for me, as someone that's trying to follow the Bible, to take what the Bible says and say I shouldn't spank my kid. For whatever reasons we want to use or objections we want to throw in there, I have a really hard time not saying I believe about the Bible, but saying I don't spank. I just don't see how those equal. I don't see how those make sense. So you could do what you want, and we can all do what we want. This is what I believe God is saying that we should do, and so we'll leave that part at that. But to say that we, though, are God's ambassadors, and that's the thought behind it, right? We don't own our kids, and that should inform how we discipline. We are God's, and we're our representatives of Him to our children. So our behavior and the way that we discipline and correct should be what God expects, should be representative of what God would do, what He wants us to do. It should never be spur of the moment actions out of frustration or anger or embarrassment. Slapping your kid around, that's not discipline. Pushing them around, and we talked about this, I think, in Instruct, grabbing their arm and yanking them here and there and physically manhandling them, that's not discipline. That's not being a good ambassador of how God would do it. Our goal, again, in discipline is to correct and turn their hearts towards God. It's to take the actions or the things that are happening and change them, correct them, and turn them in the right direction. Right? Behavior will also change, right? When you correct, behavior changes, but we want more than surface level change. Right? We want heart change. We want heart reconciliation with the Lord. And so if discipline only changes behavior, it needs to get deeper than that. And that's why it's not just the action, there's a conversation that happens. Right? There's discussion that happens along with the discipline. Expectations that are set, right? And things that, and we'll talk about that here as well. But our goal in discipline, again, is to correct and turn their hearts towards Him. Behavior will change, but we want their heart to change because, and this applies to us as well, sinful behavior, right? When we sin, that offends God. Sin offends, right? Sin offends the Lord, and He does not want us to sin. We need to teach our children that as well. We need to teach them discipline and do right because God is the King, right? He is the King, and they must obey Him, just like we must obey Him. God is King. He is our King. We say we believe this book. We're saved. We have a home in heaven someday, and He's our King. He's our Savior. We're required to obey, and we need our children to realize that. That's not just obey because they want to obey mom and dad because mom and dad say so, but get used to obeying your authority because God is our authority. He is our King, and we're required to obey Him. And when they understand that, when that concept is understood, it's easier to change. It's easier to be corrected. And that applies to us as well. When we look at it in that light, when we look at that God is our King, it's way easier for us to be corrected. Right? When someone comes to you or a sermon is preached or something is done or even reading your own Bible, you're confronted with your sin. When you believe and live in a way that God is your King and He must be obeyed, it's way easier to be corrected. Those of us that have times where we are hard to be corrected, where we get offended when we're corrected, or we just don't like being corrected, we're not living a way that God is our King. We're living a way that we are our King. We are our own end-all, be-all. And so to be corrected, if you're easily corrected, you probably have a good relationship with the Lord and understand your position. And that's what we want to instill to our children. We want them to learn that from us. Right? We want to set that precedent up so as they grow to be adults and have their own family, that is their view of God. And as they grow in their relationship with Him, you just enforce on how they grew up that is the case. It removes hurdles. It removes hurdles that they're going to have to face hurdles in their life anyway, their spiritual life and everything in life. They have hurdles they're going to have to overcome. We can help remove some of those hurdles or make them a little shorter, easier to get over, based on how we bring them up, how we show them things should be done. I'm sure I got way ahead on some of my points. Yep. Yeah, so okay, that whole one. Great. Okay. Wow, did I go back too far? No, I went back too far. Okay, so here we'll just leave that up for a second. Those are all the things I already said. I'm really bad at keeping that on track. All right, so going back to Proverbs chapter 3, which I'll do here real quick. Proverbs 3, verse number 12. The Bible says, "For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth." And this goes back to the point that discipline is corrective, not necessarily punitive. While it is a punishment, right? While correction and discipline is a punishment, it's not exclusively that or meant to be that only. It's meant to be corrective, right? Who the Lord loveth, he correcteth. So discipline is a form of love, and it's an expression of love. It's not payback, right? So when we're disciplining our kids or when we're disciplined by the Lord, it's not payback, right? It's not revenge. It's not even putting them in their place. If we're disciplining from that perspective, we are doing it emotionally, and we're not doing it as ambassadors or representatives. We're doing it out of our own emotions. And it's easy to do that. It's easy to, especially in the moment when they've done something and you've probably told them multiple times, or they don't do something you've told them to do multiple times. It's easy for the frustration to well up and for the punishment to come out of you, out of anger, out of frustration, out of just annoyance. And we have to avoid that. And you have to actively work at avoiding that, because that's the natural thing to do. It's natural to get frustrated and boom. Yeah, and even if it's not a explosion of temper, but if it's still done from your heart out of a frustration, like you're controlling yourself, you feel like, but it's still being done out of frustration, out of anger, out of annoyance, that is not out of love, right? That's not the way that God would have us do it. We are to do it in the way that God would do it. Proverbs 19:18 says, "Chasten thy son while there is yet hope." Right? We are God's agents to save their life, right? And we talked about that already, to save them, to set them up for success, to remove some of those hurdles. So chasten them while there's hope of change, while there's hope of getting to their heart. Chasten them. Don't put it off. Don't do it in the wrong way. Right? Discipline is for us to move towards our children, not against them. Right? To move towards them, not against them. It's not us, putting them in the pen and saying you're bad. You're go to prison for this emotional prison or this physical prison or whatever it may be, and it's us against them. It's the punishment of the discipline is to bring them back, is to turn their hearts towards you, and so how you do it greatly impacts the effect of that. So if you do it out of frustration, if you do it out of anger, I'm sure I wrote that down too. That's their expression of love there. If we're doing it out of anger or annoyance or frustration or to get back or to prove a point, there's no attempt to reconcile their heart. Right? There's just an attempt to prove a point or to be angry or to be frustrated, and because you're bigger and in charge, you can. So if we're doing it from that heart sense, that emotional part, that mentality, then we're pushing them away, right? And that's where a lot of people are afraid what will happen when discipline and punishment comes, when the rod is used, is that you're going to push your kids away, you're going to make them bitter or angry against you. But if you do it in the right way, if you do it the way that God says to do, out of love, with the intent of turning them back to you, with the intent of correcting and saving their life while there's hope, then that brings growth, right? That brings maturity. And so discipline is designed for growth, not pain. Now, discipline brings pain. There's pain in discipline. When you mean there's pain in discipline as an adult, right? When you make a mistake, when you have to correct a mistake, there's pain that's involved there. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional. Right, but when mistakes are made and things need to be corrected, there's always pain involved. But discipline for your children is not designed specifically to cause pain. It's designed to cause growth. And again, as you enact discipline, as you do discipline with your children, that has to be in your mind. That has to be in your actions. That has to be how you're doing it. So don't discipline to cause pain. Discipline to cause growth. The pain may be there, and pain comes with it, but have the heart to grow them, right? To put them back on the right path. Hebrews 12:11 says, "Now no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous." Right? No one likes to be chastened, but grievous. So it's not even not happy, it's bad, it's unfortunate. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. So we don't like chastising. We don't like someone telling us we're wrong. We don't like someone correcting us. No one likes it. But sometimes it's necessary. It's not happy. It feels bad. But those that are willing to take it afterwards, it brings growth, right? It yields fruit. For those that are willing to take that correction and exercise or change or be made different because of it. So if we apply that to our children, they aren't going to like it. No child is going to say, yes, Father, can I have another? Right? Never. That's never going to be said. They want out. They don't want it. They are almost afraid of it more than anything. Right? If you threaten punishment, sometimes that causes fear. Just the threat of it. Right? No one likes it, but it's necessary to correct, to change, to put them back on the right path. So, some practical ways that we can implement discipline. And there are many. This is nowhere the limit of it or what you should do and the only thing that could be done. Just some suggestions and maybe some ideas to make sure it's more understandable. So the very first thing is you need to create rules that are clear and fair. Right? When it comes to your household, there need to be expectations. And that's, whether it's your job, whether it's loans that you take out, with life in general, if you have clear expectations, everybody involved is more happy. Because everyone understands what's expected. They know what they're expected to do. They know what's expected from you as the other party. So when you set out clear rules that are clear and fair to everyone in the home, mom knows what the expectations are for the girls and the son, and everyone knows what their role is, what the expectations are. Everyone's going to have different rules in their home. Everyone's going to have different things, and that's fine. That is your responsibility. Right, that's your responsibility as the parents to set up those rules. Now, when you set up those rules, keep them. Right, don't, and we'll get to the rules here in a second. We'll talk about that in a second. So create rules that are clear and fair. Second, confront and correct without anger. So when the rules are broken, you confront them and you correct them without anger. Right, a rule is broken, it has to be confronted. Not because you're mad about it, but just because if you gave the expectation is broken. There's a rule's broken. You have to confront it and correct it, not angrily, but you have to do so. And then you have to enact consequences, right? So consequences may vary depending on the rule that's broken, depending on severity, a lot of things are dependent on that. But when consequences are necessary, you as the parent have to enforce them and enact them. And then reward obedience and always reaffirm love. So you're not always just correcting and hammering on the bad things. When they do right, acknowledge it, right? In any classroom, and teachers will tell you this, in any of these Sunday school classrooms, the youth room, it's the negative kids that always get the response, right? The bad kids always get all the attention because you're always correcting. And the good kids that are never a problem, always doing what they're supposed to be doing, just kind of get ignored and overlooked. And it's something you have to do on purpose as well. You don't want that to be your home. That only time you ever deal with this kids is when you have to fix something, correct something, punish, discipline. You want to, when they do right, when they obey, acknowledge it, right? Give them, encourage them, and tell them that you saw it. Encourage the obedience, and always with correction, with acknowledging obedience, always love. After correction is done, after discipline is done, reaffirm love. Always reaffirm love. Come from a heart of love every single time. Because again, we understand kids need love. They need to feel loved, even when they're being disciplined, even when they're being corrected, maybe even more in those moments. Reaffirm love when they're being disciplined. Reaffirm love when they're being rewarded. So, rules. Oh yeah, the small text. So there are a couple different kinds of rules. There are in your home. There are negotiable rules and there are non-negotiable rules. Right? Some rules, there's no negotiations. It is what it is. Some things remain constant no matter the age of the child, right? We don't lie. Lying is not allowed. That rule doesn't change. We don't steal. That lie doesn't change, right? We don't cheat. That rule does not change, no matter how old they are, no matter anything. That's a non-negotiable rule. There are some negotiable rules. We'll go back to the non-negotiable here first. Luke 6:31 says, "And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also unto them likewise," right? The golden rule, right? So do unto others. That rule doesn't change, right? Jesus says, as you want men to treat you, treat them that way. So teaching our kids the golden rule is a good thing, right? And that rule doesn't change. Always treat others the way you want to be treated, right? So treat them nice. Treat them better than you want to be treated, right? So that applies to their siblings. That applies to their coworkers someday and their spouse and their kids and the people around them, right? Those are non-negotiable. Negotiable rules. Bedtimes. Those are negotiable sometimes, right? Eat your food. Call when you're going to be late, right? How much TV or screen time they get, those types of things that can be negotiable. Now, again, it's up to you in your home how you set those rules. And sometimes, if the kids want to stay up late, maybe there's an exception to those rules. Maybe bedtime isn't 8 o'clock, maybe something special and they stay up later. Or whatever the case may be. Again, that's a simple, easy one. You can set that however you want it to be. But when it comes to negotiable rules, the good rule for you to follow as a parent is never change a rule or make an exception based on the child's emotional complaint. Because they will emotionally complain about all rules. Why do I have to go to bed this early? It's not fair, right? Why do I have to call when I'm be late? It's not fair. Why do I have to stop doing this? It's not fair. Never change a rule based on their emotional complaint, right? And a lot of times when we have emotional complaints, it depends where you're at. For me, sometimes it makes me dig in, right? It makes me dig my heels in and be like, oh, you don't like that? We're definitely doing it then, right? But there can be a point where they wear you down. They don't stop asking, and we don't take care of it maybe in the moment, and we just want them to be quiet, so we give in. I won't say I've never done that. I definitely have done that. And if you're a parent for any amount of time to a child that speaks, you have also done it, and it happens. And they might not even speak, right? They may just make noise. We give in to noises too. So it's a fight. You have, again, not to say that you will never give in, not to say you'll never negotiate with rules, but don't change just because they whine about it, right? That's not setting the right type of precedent that we want them to know. Help them to understand, and especially as they get older, help them to understand how they approach asking for exceptions matters. Whining and complaining emotionally is not the proper way to do it. Having respectful conversation and presenting their logic, right? You can teach them how to be respectful. I mean, that's what parents want from their children and need is respect. So teach them when they want to negotiate something, they are allowed to bring those things up. They should be allowed to have those conversations. Again, you go back to non-negotiable ones, no. There's no conversation if you want to lie today. No, the answer is no. But if you want to stay up later, or you want to have something different for dinner, or you want to watch this show, or whatever the case may be, teach them how to respectfully have those conversations with you and how to bring up their thoughts and where they're coming from. Now, also teach them if they are still told no, to let it go, to be respectful and accept the negotiation that has come their way and the decree you as the parent has made. But we should take those moments to teach them how to have those conversations. Because if they grow up not knowing how to respectfully bring disagreements to people, they're just going to be angry, emotional, whiny adults. And when they don't agree with something, they're going to whine about it to their coworkers. Right? So let's remove some of those hurdles and allow them to learn how to bring those things up respectfully and how to have those conversations with you as their parent. That's a good opportunity to be able to do that. So those are the rules they have, negotiable, non-negotiable. Correction. So confront and correct without anger. And then we talked about this already a little bit, but we must be the representation of God, right? Your emotions must be under control. Never discipline when angry or frustrated. Sometimes, giving them a timeout, sending them to their room is not for them to think about what they've done. It's for you to cool off. Right? I have done that. I've been very frustrated with them, and if I had disciplined in the moment, I would be doing it sinfully, angrily, emotionally. So you send them to their room and you tell them, you think about what you've done, I'll come to you when I'm ready, and then you pray. Right? And you go ask God to help you. Right? You don't sit there on the couch and go, and stew, I can't believe they did it again. I can't believe they did it again. Right? That's not what that time is for. That time is to say, Lord, help me. I'm frustrated. And I know that's not the right way to do this. So Lord, help me, help my emotions. Help me to love them like you love me. Help me to correct them like you correct me when I make mistakes. When I always make mistakes, you never come and try to smack me around. You come to me lovingly and try to correct me. And you start praying, that'll calm your frustration. That'll get rid of it. And that will allow you to have the right heart when you go in. And then you can approach them out of love and to try to change their heart, not punish. And that's how you need to do it. Next. Enact consequences. So consequences must be done. Colossians 3:25 says, "But he that doeth wrong shall receive for the wrong which he hath done." There has to be consequences. It can't just be stop it, don't do that again. There has to be consequences, and that's why the rod is used in that way. It's a consequence of breaking a rule or of breaking the law as you would have it in your home. Wrongdoing requires consequences. Loving your child requires you to take actions to correct. Right? If to love your child, you must be the one that takes the action to correct them, to put them on the right path. Overlooking wrongdoing is a disservice to them. Right? Just telling them it's wrong and not giving consequences, that's a disservice to your children. That is teaching them the wrong thing in a lot of different areas. It's hard on us to follow through sometimes. I mean, it's probably harder on us to follow through than most anything that comes to discipline, because time, inconvenience, you just don't want to deal with it, you don't feel like handling it, you're not in the mood for it, whatever the case may be, inconvenience, or you're angry, whatever the case is, overlooking and not bringing consequences is a disservice to them. So do the hard thing, do the inconvenient thing, control your emotions, take the time needed, give correction, and then explain the whys, right? It's a process. If you're enacting discipline, it's not a 30-second ordeal, right? It could be a 10, 15, 20-minute ordeal. And if you're cooking supper, right, or you're fixing the car, or you're on a phone, it's going to require even more time, right? And so and that's why it's easy for us to just be like, just don't do it again, right? And because taking the time to control yourself, get yourself in the right heart, go to them, take the time explaining what they've done, meting out the consequences, and then explaining after, giving the love and explaining the whys and the correction that's needed beside just the action. It requires effort. It requires effort from us, and that's exhausting sometimes. And so it's easy for us to just overlook it and not handle the consequences. But not handling the consequences, again, is a disservice to them. Love requires action. Love requires you to put in the time and act. And then praise and reward obedience. So it's about balance, right? If all we ever do is punish, and we never reward or praise, then we're out of balance. We're out of whack. So, and it's easy, again, to take care of all the negative stuff and forget to reward them when the positive is there and to encourage them to do those things. If all the attention we ever give is negative, when a rule is broken, they can become disheartened. Right? Because they feel like they're always in trouble. I'm always doing the wrong thing. Mom's never happy with me. Dad's always mad at me. I can never do anything right. Now, you can get them down a path of just, why try anymore? So we got to give some praise. We got to give some reward. We got to give them that love. So look for opportunities to praise for the behavior you want. So when they do what they're supposed to do, when an afternoon goes by and the sisters don't yell and fight with each other, tell them at supper, I noticed you guys played very well today. I'm proud of you. Good job. You were very mature. You didn't fight one time. You took care of her. You didn't whine about this. You guys are awesome. You know how far that goes for little kids? A long way. Big kids, adults, praise goes a long way. Now, if your boss praises you at work for a job you did, you feel, okay, I could work this job another day. I will come back tomorrow. Like that, praise from employers, praise from spouses, praise from those in authority over you, praise from people that you love and care about, that goes a long way. That also applies to our children. So don't overlook that. Reaffirm your love for them in the negative situations, right? Always tell them you love them. Always show them you love them when they're in trouble, and the positive ones. It's about balance. So making sure we incorporate all those things, and that's a lot of stuff to go through. And I'm finished, but I guess I'll finish with saying discipline is vital, right? It's necessary. Children that are undisciplined, the Bible tells us, grow up to be a shame to their parents. So discipline is necessary. Discipline is hard for those giving the discipline because it requires a lot of investment. It requires you to be in control. It requires you to express love intentionally. So that means you have to overcome your shortcomings. But discipline is necessary, and as a parent, that's your responsibility. No, I mean, you love them, so discipline them with love, rather than wait for them to get out of your home and have to be disciplined by people that don't care about them. Right? You love them. Take the time. Take the effort. Make it part of your home, and always reaffirm love. Always reaffirm love. All right.